Welcome back to another DPS analytic video. This is going to be week 6 for phase 5 of Blackwing Lair. As we'll look into the logs this week, it's going to be very quick compared to the other weeks because there's not a whole lot of data change. That's because most players are hitting their full BIS, and there's not really too much to say about that. People can't get too much more RNG or too much faster of kill times. Looking at all percentiles, we will see that the Demo Lock continues to climb ahead, and finally the LA Shaman has closed that gap to the Destruction Lock. Looking at last week's logs I have on my second screen, it is almost identical. I'm just looking at my previous video, by the way. It's almost identical. The Ret Paladins moved up a little bit. The Assassination Rogue is about the same spot. The Combat Rogue has been taken the place of the Balance Druid, and that's pretty much it. Moving on to max percentile, we will see pretty much the same order as last week as well. The Demo Lock was in second, and the Ret was in third. Feral Druid was right here as last week, and then we had a much bigger lead from the Combat Rogue, which is now down here. The Combat Rogue had a huge lead to where probably around here where the Assassination Rogue was, and then had this gap between these three classes as well. Everything else is pretty much the same. Frost Mage performing a little bit worse than last week, and then the Melee Hunter moving down a couple spots as well. Moving on to 95 percentile, we'll see the same exact rankings as last week. 1, 2, 3 is exactly the same. We had the Feral Druid and the Balance Druid right here instead of the Ret Paladin. So the Ret Paladins moved up a couple spots, all the way down here where the Arcane Mage is. And after that, it's very much the same, with the Shadow Priest going up 1 or 2 spots, the Affliction Lock going up 1 or 2 spots as well, and then the Fire Mage going up 2 rankings on top of that. But everything else is very, very close within each other, and this is probably the most balanced phase we've seen so far. Moving on to each fight specifically, we're going to try to speed run through this. Feral Druid, Fury Warrior, Ret Pally, and then the Arcane Mage. Looking at max percentile, we'll still see the Fury and the Ret actually cranking this week. I've never seen them this high in comparison. Moving on to Veil, the one fight where Burning Adrenaline just destroys the meters. Assassination Rogue putting up way higher than I've ever seen them perform. This is insane. So maybe it is worth looking at these max percentiles. But yeah, when you look at 95, it's the same 5 classes as it's always been. Demo Lock making the Fire Mage have a run for its money there. But other than that, it's the same 5 classes: Assassin, Combat, Feral, and Fury Warrior. Moving on to Broodlord, sort of similar to every other week. The Demo Lock, the Balance, and the Shadow Priest always doing really, really well on this fight. And then when you look at max percentile, a little bit of a difference now. It used to be very, very close within each other, but you're starting to see this gap between the Shadow Priest and below. But still similar to last week as well. Not too many rankings have changed here. Moving on to Fire Maw, we'll see that the melee are still dominating on this fight. LA Shaman doing incredibly well for some reason. I'm very surprised to see the LA Shaman this high up. Even beating the Arcane Mage and Balance Druid this week, which was not the case last week. Going to 95 percentile, get a little bit more of a mixed bag of things here, with the Ret Paladin doing a little bit lower on average compared to that max percentile, and then the Arcane Mage a little bit higher than what we saw previously. Moving on to the Ebon Rock and Flame Gore fight, we'll still see the Demo Lock, Fury Warrior, and Combat Rogue, followed by your Affliction Lock still blasting at that top percentile. And then looking at max, will it still be the Fury Warrior? No, it's no longer the Fury Warrior. The Fury Warrior has finally been beaten on this fight for that max percentile. It's always been Fury Warrior, and it's been by a huge margin. And that's no longer the case. These 3 classes are very, very close within each other. And I believe maybe next week we'll see one of these take over another spot from each other or move down a ranking. Going on to Cro-Mag, is it still the same thing? Yep, Fire Mage, Fire Vulnerability, just incredibly busted. Affliction Lock, Balance Druid, and Shadow Priest following those numbers, as well as the Demo Lock as well. Going to 95 percentile, still the Fire Mage on top, followed by your Arcane Mage, Demo Lock moving up a couple spots from last week as well. Frost Mage doing significantly better than it's previously done. Shadow Priest still doing incredibly well, and then your Destruction Lock right behind all of that. I'm noticing this now, all of the spell vulnerability classes are very, very close now. They were a little bit further away from the Destro or Demo Lock, but now they're starting to be in these top rankings. The only thing that was really close was like the Feral Druid, the Assassination Rogue, and the Ret Pally, but now you're starting to see that these are the classes that don't really benefit from those spell vulnerabilities. The LA Shaman should be benefiting from at least one of those, maybe 2, but they don't have a full primary rotation that they can be spamming. And finally, moving on to Nefarian, we will see a very similar number from last week as well. All the melee, the hunters, and the Warlocks are doing incredibly well. The mages and shamans aren't doing so well in this fight, exactly the same as last week, pretty much. Max Percentile was a marksman hunter, and yep, same thing as last week as well. And we're only doing over 1 week. If we did 2 weeks, for example, you would see the combination of both of those logs. So I just thought I'd point that out real quick, because I keep saying the same thing over and over. I feel that it's the same thing as last week, but it really is. With everyone pretty much having full bis at this point and the DPS starting to stagnate moving into phase 6, I may continue to make this every 2 weeks instead of every week, just to kind of spread it up and have more to talk about rather than just saying the same thing over and over again. But anyways, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe for more videos just like this one. Comment down below what you'd like to see next, and as always, I will see you in the next one.